Hello everyone, I'm Somdatta Karak and I welcome you to CCMB Conversations. This is our space to discuss with experts and understand how science and technology are shaping in India. Today we have with us Mahesh Sankaran, professor at the National Centre for Biological Sciences, Bengaluru. Mahesh is the expert of savanna ecosystems and is well known for his work on how rainfall and herbivores impact the African savannas particularly in terms of their biodiversity and tree cover. Lately, he has also been looking into rainforests and other grasslands. And across these ecosystems, he has now undertaken long-term monitoring studies to understand how changing climate is impacting these ecosystems. He's especially looking into plants of these areas, carbon recycling, and we are trying to uncover all these complex terms with Mahesh here. Thank you, Mahesh, for joining this conversation.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
Mahesh, let's start with savanna ecosystems itself. What are these ecosystems really?
So savannas are they're ecologically unique and economically important biome. They're characterized by the co-dominance of two contrasting life forms, trees and grasses. So these are ecosystems where you have a more or less continuous understory of grasses, and within this matrix you have a smattering of trees, and these trees can be fairly, the density of trees can range from being fairly open to fairly dense. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a diverse habitat. You get a whole range of different habitats within the umbrella term savanna, all the way from very open habitats to densely wooded habitats. And the thing that differentiates it from forests is that once tree cover gets beyond a certain point, they tend to shade out the grasses. And so in forests, you don't have grasses, whereas in savannas, you have an understory of grasses.
I see.
And that's one way to actually differentiate a forest from a savanna.
Yeah. But then grasses are still the most dominant form?
Well, grasses are very abundant in the understory, and it's the presence of the grasses that actually drives the functional ecology of savanna ecosystems. So we know grasses, I'm talking about tropical savannas, the grasses tend to be C4 species. They utilize the C4 photosynthetic pathway, which does better under drier conditions and more arid conditions, whereas the trees are C3. And grasses have this life history where they just dry out in the dry season, and they produce these very fine fuels that have evolved to burn. Mm-hmm. So you have grasses that are shade intolerant, but they're very fire tolerant, and they serve as a fuel for fires in these ecosystems. So savanna ecosystems burn. They just burn a lot. And the trees in these ecosystems, just because they have a long history of burning, are adapted to fire. So they have traits that show fire adaptations, like thick barks, and beyond a certain size, they don't die. Even if they burn, because these are all surface fires, they're able to resprout and they survive. Whereas once tree cover becomes dense, they tend to shade out the grasses. So forests, you don't have grasses in the understory. So you don't have fuel.
You mean the usual rainforest, or
even in a deciduous forest or dry forest or moist forest or something like that. Right? You don't have the grasses in the understory. Because you don't have the grasses in the understory, you don't have this huge fuel load. You might have leaf litter, but fires are not a very common phenomenon in forests, and so the trees don't tend to be fire adapted.
Got it.
Yeah, but the trees tend to be shade tolerant.
Yeah.
Whereas the savanna trees are shade intolerant.
So I'm also trying to understand if the grasses are not there in these other deciduous or forests because the tree density is so much?
Yeah, because they get shaded out. Or the grasses that you find in these wet forests around the edges tend to be C3 grasses. So grasses that use the ancestral C3 photosynthetic pathway.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. So also, before we get into the more complexities of savanna, my school geography of savanna is the African ecosystem, like the Lion King ecosystem. And when I was browsing through your work, I realized that savanna are across Asia to Latin America, Australia. So where are savanna ecosystems in India really?
Yeah, so like you said, when people think about savannas, they just typically think about Africa. Yeah. But if you just think, if you keep the the definition of mine where you have a grassy understory and a discontinuous strata of trees, then we find these ecosystems on many continents across the globe. In fact, they cover about 25 to 30, depending on whose estimates you look at, or even more, uh, part of the Earth's land surface, and a large and more than 50% of the Earth's southern continents. So, Africa is mostly savanna, huge tracts of savanna. Australia has huge tracts of savanna. Brazil, South America, you have the Cerrado and like most of and the Indian subcontinent also has a lot of savannas, but historically they've been viewed, or they've been classified from a forestry kind of perspective. So the term savanna itself is not used. They say open forest, scrub forest, deciduous forest. Well, many of them actually have these grassy understories.
Got it.
So they're functionally savannas. But by classifying them as forests, like I said, fires are, you can tend to mismanage them, because fires are not an intercomponent of forest, but they are of savannas. But if you call them a forest, then you tend to manage it as a forest. You'll suppress fires, you'll suppress herbivory, you'll suppress, and all of which is actually mismanaging these ecosystems. They need to burn, they need herbivores in them, and so on. So actually large tracts of the Indian subcontinent traditionally were covered with savannas. We've lost most of these because they're very easy to transform, right?
Interesting.
So, like all of central India and the Deccan Plateau, these nutrient-rich savannas have already been transformed. Now we have more of the mesic, the wetter kind of savanna, tall grasses, and more woody savannas what remain. The open savannas, most of them have already been transformed in India. Yeah.
So this rocky landscape that we see in Hyderabad, for example, is that a savanna or is that a grassland?
No, there are. I saw some very great photos of lots of savanna habitats around Hyderabad, for example. So open grasslands in India, there are very few. Like you have the Bunny, and you have the high elevation montane grasslands. And probably there were some large tracts in the Deccan, but there are also large tracts of savannas where you have both the grasses and the trees, but fairly open.
So they really are, very nearby ecosystems, or one leads into the other.
No, the trees are they're embedded in the matrix. So it's not an untreed, it's just not an open grassland, but you have a grassland with
what I'm
scattering
trying to
of trees.
understand is that probably there's a grassland ecosystem and then there's a savanna ecosystem right beside it.
Sort of, if you look across rainfall gradients, it usually transitions from, fully open grasslands to sparsely treed, open savannas, and then as rainfall gets more, you become wooded savannas, and then it transitions into forests. Across broad gradients.
So I also understand that savanna ecosystems are not very well studied, and is that because a lot of our imagination of savanna happens to be in Africa, where it has not, scientific studies in general have not happened so much there, or we have just imagined these to be wastelands were not worthy of studying?
So most of our knowledge of savanna ecosystems comes primarily from Africa, but there's also a lot of work done from Australia and South America. The Indian savanna ecosystems are not well studied, like you said, and this is not just an issue that persists in the Indian subcontinent, but for the longest time people did think that savannas were degraded forests. And there was a debate about whether savannas are natural systems or not for a long time. And now we know that savannas are in fact natural ecosystems, they're not degraded forests. And this is work coming from across the globe. But in India, again, they have not been studied. They've largely classified even administratively as wastelands. So, and most people continue to, and like I said, because we don't classify them as savannas, most people still call them forests, scrub forests, thorn forests, so on, and we manage them as such. And they're administratively classified as wastelands, so it's easy to convert them to other uses. So, and they haven't got the due that they deserve, and not just in India, globally. And people they have a term for this. They call it biome awareness disparity, I think. So people tend to value forests more than grasslands.
The green forests more.
So if you see an open land, it's a wasteland, but if you see a forest, it's much more valuable.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at savannas, they host unique biodiversity. All of the, these programs that you watch on National Geographic with, these teeming with ungulates and all these wildlife, they are in savanna ecosystem. Forests don't tend to have much large wildlife. I mean, you have a lot of bats and monkeys and a lot of insects and diversity in the plant level. But if you're looking at herbivores and predators, I mean,
Yeah.
they're all in savanna ecosystems.
Correct.
So they have unique biodiversity, but yeah, and they should be conserved for that.
Yeah. So, in addition to biodiversity, is there also a unique economic potential that savannas hold?
I think yes, because they host most of the world's rangelands and support most of the world's pastoralists. Yeah, so a lot of the cattle and livestock, and they are globally in savanna ecosystems, and so they have very huge production potential for livestock, and yeah, so most of the world's rangelands are in open savanna ecosystems.
Got it. And
pastoral communities, their livelihoods and their
Yeah.
very existence is tied into
Yeah,
these
yeah.
systems.
I would also like to understand the fires in the savanna ecosystem a little better. So, do they catch fire by themselves? I mean, simply because they are dry grasses, they are in hot areas and they catch fire? Or what is it with fire and savanna ecosystems? Because you also mentioned earlier that we tend to, I mean, when we think of them as forests, we tend to suppress fires, but that's not good for savanna. So, if you can elaborate on
So,
that.
like I was saying, this C3, C4 grasses, which are the dry season grasses, everything about them, they have evolved to burn, right? I mean, they form these really fine fuels that are dry out completely in the dry season, and they're very flammable. And they don't kill the plant, right? Because the grasses grow from the tillers. The above ground part is dead anyway. So, and savannas have been burning for last 100,000 to a million years. I mean, fires have been an integral part of savanna ecosystems. So, ever since these grasslands spread across the globe, they have been burning. So, it's not, so fire is natural in these systems, but the fire regimes today may not be natural. I mean, what happened in the past, either it was lightning strikes and so on and so forth. Today, at least in the Indian context, or large parts of the globe, the fires are either set by humans or largely set by humans, I should say. So the fire regimes have changed. We have very few natural fires, and most of them tend to be actually human-induced fires. But yeah, the timing of it may have changed, and the ignition may have changed, the cause of the ignition, but it's still fires still continue to be an integral part of these ecosystems.
So,
yeah.
For example, my apartment faces the University of Hyderabad land, which has a lot of these dry grasses. I still don't know if they should be called savanna or grasslands, but either of them. I think areas around that do have fires that are set by humans. Is that a matter of concern?
Well, I don't think so. It's a matter of concern for some people if you have a forest-centric view.
Yeah.
But like I said, these ecosystems are supposed to burn. The fires in the savannas are pretty rapid. They they spread quite rapidly. They're not very intense, and they don't tend to kill most. So most of the savanna trees, they're able to survive these fires.
And the animals that
The animals, yeah, they evolved with it. There may be definitely mortality, a few now and then, but by and large, most.
So the ungulates know how to
They know how
protect
to,
themselves.
even other species,
Got
right?
it.
Because they're fast-moving fires. So if you're below the ground, soil temperatures don't high very deep, and these are all surface fires. It's not the canopy of trees that are burning; it's just the understory, and I think many people, including pastoralists, have set fires to these because once they burn, it also produces much better forage for the herbivores once the rains come, right? And so fire is an integral part of the system. It's not that all the trees are dying, and this is not the narrative that you'll see in the news. When you see in the news, if there was a fire, it'll be like forest gutted and like this has happened, that has happened. But you go back the next year, the forests are back. I mean, if you go through the news of different places in the Western Ghats, whether it's Bandipur, Mudumalai, or any other protected areas, you can see newspaper articles saying, "Oh, forests have been gutted." The next year, it's kind of back, right? Because these are adapted systems. But if it is a true forest, on the other hand, fire is bad. It can really kill. So, savannas, fires are good. Savannas and grasslands, whereas in forests, it's bad. So I think we need to be a little bit more nuanced in our the way we view fires, because I think for some reason there's a blanket view that all fires are bad, but I don't think it's the case. Fires in forests are bad, but fires in savannas may be needed. And if you prevent it from burning, then there's a buildup of fuel, and when the fire does occur, and it will occur, you can't prevent it from, not burning for 50 years, 100 years. It come like 4 years, 5 years, the fire will be more intense, and it'll burn over larger areas because you have much more fuel.
So it's much better that it burns in shorter bursts.
Yeah.
And with climate change, do you also look at the fires in savanna different?
Well, there is it seems to be that, climate change can be a bit of a problem because the conditions are drier, so you're going to get more hot fire or fire days. And it's problematic in places like Australia, for example. Australia is a very crazy fire regime, right, compared to, because the trees also have a lot of volatiles, and you have these really fast moving fires that cut the canopy. So places like Australia, I think there's major concern about these savanna fires. In other places, it's less. It is a concern, but probably not as much. But yeah, you're going to have more fire days, sort of fire weather days.
So is this fire also a factor in nutrient recycling that you also study?
Yes, it is, because multiple things. So fires volatilize a lot of the nutrients that's there in tissue, and that either goes up, but it has to come down too, right? So following fires, you have an increase in the amount of available nutrients for plants, so that once it rains, then actually, plants are able to take that up. So in the short term, there's an increase in available nutrients, but if you keep on burning over time, then it can you're tending to lose or volatilize a lot of the nutrients that get deposited elsewhere, for example. Something they call the transient maxima hypothesis. In the short term, it's an increase following fires when the rains come, but you just keep on burning for a long time, then there's a
But it's
slow
volatile,
decrease.
that's in soil? Or?
No, it just volatilizes into the atmosphere, and depending on, it can either just get deposited back, or it can just get deposited elsewhere.
Got it.
So,
All right. Thank you so much, Mahesh. You have really helped me look at savanna in a way that I have not seen earlier. Yeah.
It would be great for more people to actually give savannas their due and grasslands, and not plant trees in these ecosystems. They're meant to be open. They're not meant to be treed. It was wonderful being here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.